on a federal level, issues of immigration, Afghanistan, foreign policy. We need that diversity.
We have a very diverse community, 57% visible majority.
Especially the South Asian community that I'm very, very fond of. I see them as very hardworking, industrious, entrepreneurial people.
An issue that was raised by many new Canadians was the issue of fraud marriages.
Jason Kania came to the same conference.
Welcome to BreakfastBuzz. ਅਸੀਂ ਹਰ ਵੀਕ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕਰਨੇ ਆ ਅਵੇਅਰਨੈਸ ਦੇਣ ਦੀ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਮੁੱਦਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਟੌਪਿਕਸ ਤੇ। ਹੁਣ ਟੌਪਿਕ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਹੌਟ ਚੱਲਣ ਡਿਆ ਕਾਫੀ ਵੀਕਸ ਤੋਂ ਉਹ ਚੱਲਣ ਡਿਆ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਦਾ, ਫੈਡਰਲ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ 2011। ਅਸੀਂ ਹਮੇਸ਼ਾ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕੀਤੀ ਕਿ ਇਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ 'ਚ ਵੀ ਅਵੇਅਰਨੈਸ ਦਈਏ ਕਿ ਲੋਕੀ ਨਿਕਲਣ, ਪਾਰਟੀਸਪੇਟ ਕਰਨ, ਆਪਣੇ ਲੀਡਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਝਣ। ਇਸ ਸਿਲਸਿਲੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਅੱਜ 3 ਗੈਸਟ ਬੁਲਾਏ ਨੇ। ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵਾਰੀ-ਵਾਰੀ ਇੰਟਰੋਡਿਊਸ ਕਰਾਉਣਾ ਚਾਹਾਂਗਾ। मेरे राइट हैंड साइड पे सब तो पहले ने बाजी आरफा मुजफ्फर जी, शी इज़ फ्रॉम 770 AM।
थैंक यू।
ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਬੈਠੇ ਨੇ ਭੁੱਲਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਫਰੋਮ ਹਮਦਰਦ ਵੀਕਲੀ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਵਧਾਈ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਪੇਪਰ ਨੂੰ 20 ਇਅਰਸ ਵੀ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ। ਉਹਦੇ ਸਿਲਸਿਲੇ 'ਚ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵਧਾਈਆਂ ਦਾਂਗੇ। ਔਰ ਇੱਥੇ ਬੈਠੇ ਨੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੰਗ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਐਡੀਟਰ ਨੇ ਮਿਸਟਰ ਅਸ਼ਰਫ ਖਾਨ ਸਾਹਿਬ। ਵੈਲਕਮ ਟੂ ਦ ਸ਼ੋ ਜੀ।
थैंक यू वेरी मच, आपका बहुत शुक्रिया।
ਸਰ, ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਇਹੀ ਕਰਨੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਅਵੇਅਰਨੈਸ ਦਈਏ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਹੈ ਗਿਆ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸੀਨੀਅਰ ਬੰਦੇ ਹੋ ਬੈਠੇ ਹੋ, ਦੇਖਿਆ ਹੈ ਗਿਆ ਕਿ ਮੈਂਟਲੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਲੋਕ ਹਾਲੀ ਵੀ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਦੀ ਪੋਲੀਟਿਕਸ 'ਚ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਇਨਵੋਲਵ ਨੇ ਔਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਚੀਫ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਕੀ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ, ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੀਡੈਂਟ ਪਾਕਿਸਤਾਨ ਕੀ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ, ਨਾ ਕਿ ਇੱਥੇ ਦੇ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਕਲ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ, ਜੋ ਕਿ ਮੇਰੇ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਆਰ ਲੈਕਿੰਗ ਬਿਹਾਈਂਡ। ਵਾਟ ਡੂ ਯੂ ਹੈਵ ਟੂ ਸੇ ਇਨ ਦੈਟ?
ਮੇਰੇ ਹਿਸਾਬ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਉੱਥੋਂ ਦੇ ਜੰਮਪਲ ਹਾਂ ਜੀ, ਦੇਖੋ ਉੱਥੋਂ ਰਿਸ਼ਤਾ ਤਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਟੁੱਟ ਸਕਦਾ ਨਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਉਸ ਜ਼ਮੀਨ ਦੇ ਨਾਲੋਂ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਸ ਧਰਤੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਨਮ ਲਿਆ। ਸਾਡੇ ਭੈਣ ਭਰਾ ਜੋ ਵੀ ਹੈਗੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਬੈਠੇ ਨੇ, ਅਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਸਮਝਦਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੀ ਅਗਲੀ ਪੀੜ੍ਹੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਤੇ ਇਸ ਗੱਲ ਦਾ ਅਸਰ ਪਵੇਗਾ। ਪਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਤੋਂ ਵੀ ਹੱਦੋਂ ਵੱਧ ਵੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੇ ਹੋਏ ਹਾਂ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਾਡੇ ਲਈ ਮੈਂ ਸਮਝਦਾ ਕਿ ਬਹੁਤਾ ਚੰਗਾ ਨਹੀਂ। ਆਮ ਤੌਰ 'ਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਮੁਹਾਵਰਾ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਤੇ ਪਾਕਿਸਤਾਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪਾਂ ਵਰਤਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ, ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਲੜਕੀਆਂ ਸਹੁਰੀ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਪੇਕਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਹੱਦੋਂ ਵੱਧ ਖਿਆਲ ਰੱਖਣ ਅਤੇ ਉਹ ਸੁਖੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਬਚ ਸਕਦੀਆਂ। ਅਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਸਮਝਦਾ ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਣਾ ਦੇਸ਼ ਬਣਾ ਲਿਆ, ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਰਹਿਣਾ, ਇੱਥੇ ਜ਼ਿੰਦਗੀ ਕੱਟਣੀ ਆ, ਅਤੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਵੱਧ ਇਸ ਗੱਲ ਦਾ ਸੋਚਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ, ਇੱਥੇ ਦੇ ਪੋਲੀਟਿਕਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹਿੱਸਾ ਲੈਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ, ਚਾਹੇ ਉਹ ਸਿਟੀ ਦੀ ਪੋਲੀਟਿਕਸ ਹੈ, ਚਾਹੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਿੰਸ ਦੀ ਪੋਲੀਟਿਕਸ ਹੈ, ਚਾਹੇ ਉਹ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਦੀ ਪੋਲੀਟਿਕਸ ਹੈ। ਅਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਸਮਝਦਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਭਰਾ ਨੇ ਜਾਂ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਸ਼ੀਅਨ ਨੇ, ਉਹ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਉੱਥੋਂ ਦੀ ਪੋਲੀਟਿਕਸ, ਜਿਵੇਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਬੈਕ ਹੋਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਛੱਡ ਕੇ ਆਇਆ, ਉਹ ਜਦੋਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਵਰਤਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਮੈਂ ਸਮਝਦਾ ਕਿ ਦੂਜੀਆਂ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਇਸ ਨੂੰ ਚੰਗਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਮਝਦੀਆਂ। ਉਹਨਾਂ 'ਤੇ ਵੀ ਇਸ ਗੱਲ ਦਾ ਅਸਰ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਉੱਥੋਂ ਵਾਲੀ ਪੋਲੀਟਿਕਸ ਖੇਡ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ। ਪਰ ਡੇ ਬਾਈ ਡੇ ਮੈਂ ਸਮਝਦਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਉਂ ਜਿਉਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਇੱਥੋਂ ਦੇ ਜੰਮਪਲ ਬੱਚੇ ਪੋਲੀਟਿਕਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ, ਅਤੇ ਇਸ ਚੀਜ਼ ਦਾ ਕਾਫੀ ਵਧੀਆ ਅਸਰ ਪੈ ਰਿਹਾ।
ਤੁਸੀਂ ਬਾਜੀ।
देखो जी, मैं तो सिर्फ इन्ना कहांगी वाइस भाई कि ਜਿਹੜਾ ਨਾਤਾ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਟੁੱਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦਾ ਉੱਥੇ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ, ਮਗਰ
ਟੁੱਟਣਾ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ,
ਟੁੱਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦਾ। ਮਗਰ ਅਗਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਆਏ ਹਾਂ, ਔਰ ਆਫ ਕੋਰਸ ਮੈਂ ਫੀਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਆ, ਮੈਂ 14 ਸਾਲ ਪਹਿਲੇ ਅੱਛੇ ਦਿਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਥੇ ਵੀ ਦੇਖਿਆ। ਹੁਣ ਇਨਪੁਟ ਇੱਥੇ ਇਨਵੋਲਵਮੈਂਟ ਇਜ਼ ਮਸਟ। ਅਗਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਤੇ ਟੁਮਾਰੋ ਫॉर आवर चिल्ड्रन आई थिंक वी विल क्रिएट सम डिफ़िकल्टीज। पीछे की पॉलिटिक्स में नहीं, चेंज लेके आने में ज़ाहिर है यहाँ के लोग जो हैं वो विल प्ले एन इम्पॉर्टेंट रोल, मगर लोग हमें रोज़गार से निकल के, एज आपने कहा कि पॉलिटिकल मौका है, इट्स इलेक्शन टाइम, उन्होंने चाहिए है कि बाहर निकलन, अपने कंसर्नस का इस वक्त इजहार करन, ताकि कल अगर लोड़ पवे तो कैंडिडेट्स भी फील करन कि बंदे की अवेयरनेस है, एक्टिव रहा है, डेफिनेटली ही हैज़ पार्टिसिपेटेड टुवर्ड्स।
ਐਬਸੋਲਿਊਟਲੀ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੁਝ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਚਾਹੋਗੇ ਇਸ ਸਿਲਸਿਲੇ 'ਚ?
ਮੈਂ ਸਰ ਪਹਿਲੇ ਤਾਂ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸ਼ੁਕਰੀਆ ਅਦਾ ਕਰਾਂਗਾ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ 'ਚ ਬੁਲਾਇਆ। ਮੈਂ ਕਹਾਂਗਾ ਕਿ ਸਰ ਇੱਥੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਆ ਗਏ ਹਾਂ ਅਤੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਸ ਪੂਰੇ ਸਿਸਟਮ 'ਚ ਬੜੇ ਗੱਜ ਵੱਜ ਕੇ ਹਿੱਸਾ ਲੈਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਸ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਕਲ ਸਿਸਟਮ 'ਚ ਹੀ ਰਹਿਣਾ, ਚਾਹੇ ਉਹ ਸਿਟੀ ਦੀ ਹੈ, ਚਾਹੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਿੰਸ ਦੀ ਹੈ, ਚਾਹੇ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਦੀ ਹੈ, ਔਰ ਕਿਸੇ ਨਾ ਕਿਸੇ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੀ ਮੈਂਬਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਲੈਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ, ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਾਲੇ ਨਾਲ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇੱਥੇ ਬੇਸਿਕ ਨੂੰ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿੱਥੋਂ ਵਲੰਟੀਅਰ ਕੰਮ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤਾ, ਉਸੇ ਬਿਹਾਫ 'ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਟਿਕਟਸ ਮਿਲਦੇ ਨੇ, ਉਸੇ ਬਿਹਾਫ 'ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜੋਬਸ ਅਪਰਚੁਨਿਟੀ ਵੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ। ਅਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਕਿ ਬੈਕ ਹੋਮ ਦੀ ਸਿਆਸਤ ਇੱਥੇ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਉਹਦਾ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਬੈਨੀਫਿਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ ਔਰ ਸਾਡੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਉਹਦਾ ਨੁਕਸਾਨ ਹੋਏਗਾ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਮਝਦਾ ਕਿਸੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਨੂੰ ਪੁੱਛ ਲਓ ਇੱਥੇ ਕਿ ਇੱਥੇ ਦਾ ਗਵਰਨਰ ਜਨਰਲ ਕੌਣ ਹੈ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਤਾ ਹੋਏਗਾ ਪਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਜੀ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦਾ ਚੀਫ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਕੌਣ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹਦਾ ਫਲਾਣਾ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਕੌਣ ਹੈਗਾ ਤੇ ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਬਾਹਰ ਨਿਕਲਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਔਰ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਤੋਂ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਅਵੇਅਰਨੈਸ ਦੇਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਕਲ ਸਿਸਟਮ 'ਚ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਨਹੀਂ ਹਿੱਸਾ ਲੈ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੁਣ ਸਾਡੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਹੀ ਲੈਣਾ ਤੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਅਵੇਅਰਨੈਸ ਦਈਏ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਸਿਸਟਮ 'ਚ ਜਾਣਾ ਤੇ ਇਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਹਿੱਸਾ ਲਈਏ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਤੋਂ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ
ਐਬਸੋਲਿਊਟਲੀ ਆਈ ਅੰਡਰਸਟੈਂਡ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਲੋੜ ਹੈ ਔਰ ਸਾਡਾ ਇੱਕ ਰਿਪੋਰਟਰ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਜਰਨਲਿਸਟ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਪੱਤਰਕਾਰ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਇਹ ਸਾਡਾ ਫਰਜ਼ ਬਣਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਅਖਬਾਰ ਨੇ ਜਾਂ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਨੇ ਜਾਂ ਟੀਵੀ ਜਿਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਮੁਨਸਲਕ ਹਾਂ ਇਹ ਅਵੇਅਰਨੈਸ ਦੇਣ ਦੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕਰੀਏ ਕਿ ਮੈਂਟਲੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਰਹਿਣਾ ਸਿੱਖੀਏ ਜਿੰਨੀ ਜਲਦੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਲਾਂਗੇ ਓਨਾ ਬੈਟਰ ਹੋਊਗਾ
ਮਗਰ ਇੱਕ ਕਲਮੀਆ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਤੇ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਕਿ ਉੱਥੇ ਦੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਪਾਰਟੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਦੇ ਬੰਦਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਐਕਟੀਵਿਟੀਜ਼ ਦੇਖ ਕੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਦੀਆਂ ਪਾਰਟੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਤੇ ਦਫ਼ਤਰ ਬਣਾ ਲੈਣੇ ਨਾ ਮਗਰ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹੋ ਰਿਕੁਐਸਟ ਹੈ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤਵੱਸਤ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਕਿ ਫੋਰਗੇਟ ਅਬਾਊਟ ਦੈਟ ਇੱਥੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮਾਹੌਲ ਹੈ ਇਹਦੇ ਮੁਤਾਬਿਕ ਹੁਣ ਜੀਣਾ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤਾ ਜੇ ਦੋ ਕਸ਼ਤੀਆਂ 'ਚ ਪੈਰ ਪਾ ਕੇ ਮਸਲਾ ਹੀ ਹੋਏਗਾ
ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਮੇਨ ਸਟ੍ਰੀਮ ਨੂੰ ਤੇ ਬੜੀ ਆਸਾਨੀ ਨਾਲ ਬਲੇਮ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਜੀ ਉਹ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਅਟੈਂਸ਼ਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਪੇ ਕਰਦੇ ਪਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਦੀ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਕਿ ਡੂ ਵੀ ਆਲਸੋ ਗੋ ਆਊਟ ਆਫ ਦਾ ਵੇ ਟੂ ਅੰਡਰਸਟੈਂਡ ਦੈਮ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਹਾਲੇ ਤੱਕ ਆਪਣੇ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਕਲ ਸਿਸਟਮ 'ਚ ਹੀ ਫਸੇ ਹੋਏ ਹਾਂ ਜੋ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹੁਣੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਪਾਰਟੀਆਂ 'ਚ ਹੀ ਫਸੇ ਹਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਪਾਰਟੀਸਿਪੇਟ ਕਰਨੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੈਂਟ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਪੁੱਛੋ ਵੀ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਡੇਜ਼ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ 'ਚ ਪੁੱਛੋ ਬਹੁਤ ਅੱਛੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੈ ਵਿਸਾਖੀ ਮਨਾਉਣਾ ਈਦ ਮਨਾਉਣਾ ਐਵਰੀਥਿੰਗ ਮਨਾਉਣਾ ਲੇਕਿਨ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਅਦ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਵੀ ਪਾਰਟਿਸਿਪੇਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੈ ਔਨ ਡੇ ਟੂ ਡੇ ਬੇਸਿਸ ਕਰਨਾ
ਇਸ ਵਾਰੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਜੇ ਦੇਖੀਏ ਮੇਰੇ ਖਿਆਲ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੀ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਵਾਰ ਹੋਇਆ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀਆਂ ਦੀ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਸ ਵਧੀ ਹੈ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਹੋਣਾ ਕਿ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਦੋਨੋਂ ਪਾਰਟੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਲੀਡਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਹਲਕਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਰਹਿ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ
which is a good sign
ਔਰ ਮੈਂ
they are trying to reach us
ਮੈਂ ਸਮਝਦਾ ਕਿ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਆਵੇ ਸੱਤਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡਾ ਰੋਲ ਹੋਏਗਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡਾ ਯੋਗਦਾਨ ਹੋਵੇਗਾ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਸਮਝਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਸਾਡੇ ਭਾਈਚਾਰੇ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਝਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਇਹ ਅਸੀਂ ਤਦੇ ਸਾਬਤ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਵੱਧ ਤੋਂ ਵੱਧ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਵੋਟਾਂ ਪਾਵਾਂਗੇ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਇਹ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਹੋਣਾ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੈਂਡੀਡੇਟ ਖੜੇ ਨੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਖਿਆਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉੱਥੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਘੱਟ ਦੂਜੀਆਂ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਘੱਟ ਵੋਟ ਪੋਲ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਨੇ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤਾ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਇੰਟਰਸਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਕਈ ਜਿਹੇ ਹਲਕੇ ਵੀ ਨੇ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਉਮੀਦਵਾਰ ਆਪਣੇ ਖੜੇ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਪਰ ਇਹ ਆ ਵੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਸ ਗੱਲ ਦਾ ਪਤਾ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਲੀਡਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਪਾਰਟੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਆਗੂਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਹਲਕਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਈਏ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਘੱਟ ਗਿਣਤੀ ਲੋਕ ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਜਿੱਧਰ ਵੀ ਝੁਕਾਅ ਹੋਏਗਾ ਮੈਂ ਸਮਝਦਾ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਬਣਾਉਣਗੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡਾ ਇਸ ਵਾਰੀ ਇਹ ਤਬਦੀਲੀ ਲਿਆਉਣ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡੇ ਭਾਈਚਾਰਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡਾ ਯੋਗਦਾਨ ਹੋਵੇਗਾ
ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੇ ਸਰ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਵੀ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਡਿਬੇਟਸ ਕਰਾਈਏ ਔਰ ਜੋ ਕਿ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਨੇ ਔਰ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਪੁੱਛੀਏ ਐਟਲੀਸਟ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਲਿਆ ਕੇ ਇੱਕ ਫੋਰਮ ਤੇ ਖੜਾ ਤੇ ਕਰਨਾ ਨਾ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਲੋਕੀ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਕੋਈ ਕੁਐਸਚਨ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕਰਨ ਕਿ ਇਫ ਯੂ ਇਲੈਕਟਡ ਵਾਟ ਵਿਲ ਯੂ ਡੂ ਵਾਟ ਵਿਲ ਹੀ ਐਂਡ ਸ਼ੀ ਡੂ ਤੇ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਹੈ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਅਵੇਅਰਨੈਸ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਸਿਰਫ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੇ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਅੱਗੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਿੰਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਆ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਫਿਰ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਜਾਰੀ ਰੱਖਾਂਗੇ ਕਿ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਸਿਲਸਿਲਾ ਇੱਕ ਚੱਲਦਾ ਰਹੇ ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਬਿਹਤਰ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਮਝੀਏ ਔਰ ਪਾਰਟਿਸਿਪੇਟ ਕਰੀਏ ਹੋਰ ਇਸ ਚੀਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਵੀਕਲੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਅਖਬਾਰ ਹੈ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਵਧਾਈ ਦੇਣਾ ਚਾਹਾਂਗੇ ਡੈਫੀਨੇਟਲੀ ਕਿ 20 ਸਾਲ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪੂਰੇ ਕੀਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਸਾਊਥ ਏਸ਼ੀਅਨ ਪਬਲੀਕੇਸ਼ਨ ਸਮਝਦਾ ਹਾਲਾਂਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਪੜ੍ਹ ਸਕਦਾ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਪੜ੍ਹ ਸਕਦੇ ਲੇਕਿਨ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਵੀ ਆਰ ਵਨ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਵੀ ਆਰ ਨॉट ਹੀਅਰ ਡਿਵਾਈਡਡ कि कौन इंडियन है कौन पाकिस्तानी है आई बिलीव वी आर वन कम्युनिटी
बहुत खूबसूरत बात आपने कही और मैं भी मुबारकबाद देना चाहती हूँ आपका बहुत शुक्रिया कि आपने मौका दिया सॉरी मैं स्विच करनी होनी है दो लैंग्वेजेस दे विच आई डेफिनेटली कॉन्ग्रेचुलेट करने थानू हरस भाई जिस तरह तुसी कहा कि एज मीडिया पर्सनल अखबार रेडियो टैलीविजन तो ताल्लुक रखते हुए तुसी जिम्मेदारी नू निभाया ही है इत्थे कि कम्युनिटीज़ नू मिलाना किते तोड़ना नहीं जी प्यार मोहब्बत की गल करना दैट इज़ द रीज़न ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਮੇਰਾ ਖਿਆਲ ਹੈ ਸਰਵਾਈਵਲ ਔਰ 20 ਸਾਲ ਇੰਨੇ ਅੱਛੇ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੁਜ਼ਾਰਨ ਦੀ ਆਈ ਥਿੰਕ ਦਿਸ ਇਜ਼ ਦੀ ਮੇਨ ਰੀਜ਼ਨ ਬਹੁਤ ਵਧਾਈਆਂ
ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਭਾਜੀ ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ
ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੀ ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੀ ਡਿਵੈਲਪਮੈਂਟ ਇਹਨਾਂ 20 ਸਾਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਹੋਈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਸਟੱਡੀ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੋਣਾ ਕੱਢਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਅਖਬਾਰ ਆਪਣਾ
ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ ਉਸ ਟਾਈਮ ਨਾ ਫੈਕਸ ਮਸ਼ੀਨ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਸੀ ਨਾ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਟ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਕੁਝ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ ਮੈਂ ਸਮਝਦਾ ਕਿ ਉਦੋਂ ਤੇ ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਅਸਮਾਨ ਦਾ ਫਰਕ ਹੈ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਕੰਟਰੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਏ ਸੀ ਤੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਸਹੂਲਤਾਂ ਦੀ ਘਾਟ ਸੀ ਤੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਵੀ ਆ ਕੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤਾ ਉਸ ਟਾਈਮ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਘੱਟ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਸੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਵਿਆਹ ਸ਼ਾਦੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਸੀ ਤਾਂ ਉਹੀ ਬੰਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਤਕਰੀਬਨ ਕਿਸੇ ਦੇ ਦੁੱਖ ਹੋਵੇ ਸੁੱਖ ਹੋਵੇ। ਬਹੁਤ ਥੋੜ੍ਹੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਸੀ ਜਦੋਂ ਮੈਂ 25 ਸਾਲ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ 'ਚ ਆਇਆ, ਅਤੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਨਾ ਹੀ ਮੀਡੀਆ ਦੀ ਕੋਈ ਹੱਥ ਪੁੱਛ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਸੀ। ਅੱਜ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਖੋ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਬਣਦੇ ਚਾਹਵਾਨ ਲੀਡਰ ਨੇ, ਉਹ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀਆਂ 'ਤੇ ਮੀਡੀਆ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ। ਉਸ ਟਾਈਮ ਕੋਈ ਪੁੱਛਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ, ਨਾ ਇੱਥੋਂ ਤੱਕ ਕਿ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਇਸ਼ਤਿਹਾਰ ਤੱਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ।
ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸ ਬਹੁਤ ਘੱਟ ਸੀ।
ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸ ਬਹੁਤ ਘੱਟ ਸੀ, ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਹੈਗੇ ਸੀ ਉਹ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੀ। ਪਰ ਅੱਜ ਦੀ ਕੜੀ ਮੈਂ ਦੇਖਿਆ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਬੈਂਕਾਂ ਲਾ ਲਓ ਜਾਂ ਹੋਰ ਮਨੀ ਟਰਾਂਸਫਰ ਵਾਲੀਆਂ ਕੰਪਨੀਆਂ ਲਾ ਲਓ, ਬਿਲਡਰ ਲਾ ਲਓ, ਹਰ ਕੋਈ ਸਾਡੇ ਮੀਡੀਆ ਵੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਪਾਦਾ। ਸਾਡੇ ਖੁਸ਼ੀ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਆ, ਦੇਖੋ ਅਰਫਾ ਜੀ ਦਾ 24 ਆਵਰ ਚੈਨਲ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ, ਰੇਡੀਓ ਚੈਨਲ ਸਾਡੇ ਸੁਣ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ, TV ਦੇ ਚੈਨਲ ਸਾਡੇ ਸੁਰਸਾਗਰ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ, ਹੋਰ ਚੈਨਲ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ, ਰੇਡੀਓ ਸਟੇਸ਼ਨ 24 ਆਵਰ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ। ਇਹ ਇੰਨਾ ਮੀਡੀਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੀ ਉਦੋਂ। ਤਾਂ ਸੱਚ ਪੁੱਛਦੇ ਹੋ, ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਤਾ ਚੱਲਦਾ ਕਿ ਕਿਹੜੇ ਕਿਹੜੇ ਮੀਡੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨੇ। ਟੋਟਲ ਜੇ ਮੀਡੀਆ ਦੀ ਗਿਣਤੀ ਕਰੀਏ, ਉਹ ਵੀ ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਹੀ ਕੋਈ ਬੰਦਾ ਜਾਣਦਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਕਿ ਆਹ ਮੀਡੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ। ਅਤੇ ਬਾਕੀ ਇਹ ਆ ਵੀ ਅੱਜ ਦੀ ਕੜੀ ਮੈਂ ਇਹ ਸਮਝਦਾ ਕਿ ਅੱਜ ਬਹੁਤ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਾਡਾ ਮੀਡੀਆ ਅੱਗੇ ਗਿਆ, ਬਹੁਤ ਤਰੱਕੀ ਕੀਤੀ ਆ। ਅਤੇ ਇਸੇ ਤਰੱਕੀ ਦੀ ਵਜ੍ਹਾ ਕਿ ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਸ ਬਣਾ ਲਈ ਆ ਇਸ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਇਸ ਕੰਟਰੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਅੱਜ ਸਾਡੀ ਵੀ ਸੱਤ ਪੁੱਛ ਹੋਣ ਲੱਗੀ ਆ, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਇਸੇ ਗੱਲ ਦੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਖੁਸ਼ੀ।
ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡੀ ਗੱਲ ਹੈ ਜੀ। ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲੀ ਦ ਮੇਨ ਸਟ੍ਰੀਮ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਕਲ ਪਾਰਟੀਜ਼ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਨੋਟਿਸ ਕਰਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ, ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਆ ਕੇ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ, ਵਿਚ ਇਜ਼ ਐਨ ਅਚੀਵਮੈਂਟ। ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ 'ਚ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਇਹੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੱਸਣਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਵੀ ਹੈਵ ਟੂ ਗੈਟ ਇਨਵੋਲਵ, ਜੋ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਬਜਾ ਫਰਮਾਇਆ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਕਮੀ ਨੂੰ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਪੂਰੀ ਕਰਨਗੇ। ਠੀਕ ਹੈ, ਅਸੀਂ ਸਰ ਇਸ ਸਿਲਸਿਲੇ 'ਚ ਥੋੜ੍ਹੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਇੱਕ ਕੇਕ ਕਟਿੰਗ ਸੈਰਮਨੀ ਰੱਖੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਵਧਾਈ ਦੇਣ ਦੀ, ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਬਹਾਨੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਸੈਲੀਬ੍ਰੇਟ ਕਰ ਲਾਂਗੇ। ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ।
लड़की अपनी स्किन की वजह से परेशान हो
तो फिक्र की क्या बात है, लेजर स्पॉट है ना।
लेजर स्पॉट, फोटो फेशियल, थर्माज एंटी एजिंग, लेजर हेयर रिमूवल। लेजर स्पॉट, where beauty meets elegant professionals.
लेजर स्पॉट हाईवे 10 और क्वींस के संगम पर। कॉल शेला 9054872680।
ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਐਕਸੀਡੈਂਟ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ, ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਪਾਸ ਕਈ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਸਵਾਲ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਨ।
ਕਦੇ ਵੀ ਆਪਣਾ ਕਲੇਮ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਸੈਟਲ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਨਾ ਕਰੋ।
ਆਪਣੇ ਹੱਕਾਂ ਲਈ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਤਜਰਬੇਕਾਰ ਪਰਸਨਲ ਇੰਜਰੀ ਲਾਇਰ ਰਮੇਸ਼ ਸੰਘਾ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲੋ।
ਤੁਰੰਤ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ ਸੇਵਾਵਾਂ ਲਈ ਆਓ ਤੇ ਵਧੀਆ ਤੋਂ ਵਧੀਆ ਮੁਆਵਜ਼ਾ ਲਓ।
हम रियल स्टेट, फैमिली लॉ और इमिग्रेशन में भी सर्विसेज देते हैं। 905-677-9911।
ਫਰਨੀਚਰ ਖਰੀਦਣ ਦੇ ਦੋ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਨ। ਪਹਿਲਾ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਦਿਹਾੜੀ ਗੇੜੇ ਕੱਢੋ ਤੇ ਘਰ ਨੂੰ ਵਾਪਸ ਆ ਜਾਓ, ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਇੱਕ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਜਾਓ ਤੇ ਸਾਰਾ ਪਸੰਦ ਦਾ ਫਰਨੀਚਰ ਘਰ ਲੈ ਆਓ। ਨੋਬਲ ਫਰਨੀਚਰ ਤੇ ਲੱਗ ਗਈ ਆ ਭਾਰੀ ਸੇਲ। ਘੱਟ ਕੀਮਤਾਂ ਤੇ 100% ਫਰਨੀਚਰ। ਆਪਣੇ ਘਰ ਦਾ ਸ਼ਿੰਗਾਰ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਨੋਬਲ ਫਰਨੀਚਰ ਦੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਬ੍ਰਾਂਚ ਤੇ ਪਹੁੰਚੋ। 905-790-6790 905-790-6790। नोबल फर्नीचर।
अपने कारोबार की तरक्की के लिए प्रिंट पब्लिसिटी और बेहतरीन प्रिंटिंग के लिए सिर्फ एक ही नाम,
साइंस टू गो।
जहां जदीद टेक्नोलॉजी से स्टोर फ्रंट साइंस, चैनल लेटर्स, बैनर्स, रियल एस्टेट साइंस, सैंडविच बोर्ड्स, व्हीकल ग्राफिक्स, बिजनेस कार्ड्स, पोस्ट कार्ड्स, लेबल्स, फ्लायर्स आपके बजट और आपके वक्त में बनाए जाते हैं। आपका काम सिर्फ सोचना है, क्योंकि
we print your thoughts.
साइंस टू गो।
Welcome to yet another episode of Breakfast Buzz. where we do make an attempt, an honest attempt, I would say, to educate new Canadians and youth that why they should come into the system, why they should understand it, and try to adjust themselves and make the system work for them. Today, we do have Andrew Kania, MP, Brampton West, with us. He's a first-time MP, a very devoted MP. We welcome you in our studio, sir. Good morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Sat Shri Akal. Namaste. Good morning.
Well, thank you very much, sir. I see your photographs and everything that you are very involved with the community. Thank you for coming at a short notice. And let's begin with this question that how did you get involved being an ordinary citizen, a day-to-day life, and this process of being a parliamentarian? How do you find it different?
It's not so different for me because I practiced law for 20 years at my firm, Kania Lawyers. So I was a trial lawyer, and I was very involved with the legal community, and I was the former secretary of the Ontario Bar Association representing 17,000 lawyers. So I've had sort of a public profile for a while, not just in politics. But I will tell you that the biggest thing in terms of being a member of parliament as opposed to being a private citizen is the difference with your family. Because I now travel back and forth between Ottawa pretty well every week.
Oh my God.
And my children, my boys are 8 and 7, so it's definitely a change on the family. But in terms of the type of work that I've done, I'm an advocate, and I've been an advocate in terms of a trial lawyer for 20 years. So fighting on behalf of people, speaking in the House of Commons, giving speeches, all of that is very similar to what I've been doing.
Okay, so basically it does take its toll that it takes you away from the family. That's what I gather.
That's the bit. If somebody asks me what you like about the job, I tell them I love the job. And if they say what do you not like about it, I say I'm honest about it, and I say it's taxing on the family because I have a family that I love and a wife and 2 boys, and it's difficult being away from them. But it's a sacrifice that I make and a sacrifice that they make because they understand that for me, politics is a calling, it's not a job. I have a job. I could go back to my law firm anytime I wanted. This is a calling. This is something that I'm trying to do to help people. So they understand that, and that's, they support me.
So basically, involved with the immediate family, now you're more involved with the extended family, and that is the community in general.
That's right.
That's the people from different walks of life. And being in Brampton, we all know that it comprises more of the immigrant communities, first-generation Canadians, new Canadians. How do you find to interact with them?
Very well. First of all, I want everybody to know that I'm a new Canadian. I'm a first-generation Polish Canadian. My father came here in his mid-20s with nothing from Poland. My mother actually and her family after the war came to Canada as refugees. So I'm now a member of Parliament, the son of a family of refugees that came over after the war. So I understand, and I did not grow up rich. I grew up with all of the difficulties, and my first language was Polish. I grew up with all of the difficulties, and I understand what it's like to be a new Canadian immigrating to Canada and then having to get acclimatized and trying to make something of yourself. So I can tell you that in terms of the new Canadians that I've interacted with in Brampton, they're my friends. I mean, it's not just whether I help them, they're my friends. I have large groups of new Canadians that aren't just political supporters or people that I interact with, but they're my friends.
Let it be across the board. Like new Canadians means new Canadians, and it's across the board means that we do have, I always say, many United Nations out there because all communities coexist and very nicely. So basically, I'm pretty sure you interact with a lot of communities, not only Polish or not only European community, Asian communities, South Asian communities, and it diversifies even more. Having said that, how do you feel that Brampton or your constituency has changed over the years?
Well, Brampton has grown in a tremendous way. And I'm not sure what the exact statistics are, but 40-something% of Bramptonians have their first language other than English. And I believe we're now slightly over 50% of visible minorities in Brampton. So the Brampton of Bill Davis days with a small community that essentially has very little visible minorities is over. And what we have, and I think this is positive, what we have in Brampton, I believe, is a United Nations of countries and people coming together, working together, living in peace, being friends. And Brampton is an example for Canada because we don't have the same diversity everywhere across Canada. We do obviously in pockets and more so in the GTA, but we're an example to Canada of how you can live together in peace and harmony and work together and be friends and respect one another and also respect the diversity that we have, and I'll come back to that. But remember this, Canada is an example to the world. Canada shows the world how to live in peace with various communities and different religions and differences that we have. So my point is, Canada shows the world how to do it. Brampton shows Canada how to do it.
Definitely, you said it, that Canada shows the world how to do it, but let's touch on the international level that in recent days or recent months I have seen, or we all have observed, that Canada is losing respect in the international arena. We lost the seat in United Nations. So what do you have to say to that internationally on a global issue?
I think the international community is looking at Canada, although they respect Canada, but they're
absolutely.
They're looking at Canada with some longing for what I would term the old days. And they remember the Canada that was under the Liberal Party, starting, I would say, with Lester Pearson, who won the Nobel Peace Prize, and all the way through the various prime ministers and Prime Minister Chrétien most recently, even Prime Minister Martin in terms of his initiatives with the G20. People remember the Canada that was engaged internationally, that was the peacekeeper, that was involved with foreign aid in various countries. That's the Canada that people remember. This United, you mentioned this, but the Security Council seat, this is the first time in Canadian history that we applied for the United Nations seat, that we did not get it. The first time. And we're not allowed to apply now for 10 years.
Absolutely.
And I'd like you to think about it, and I have no disrespect for Germany and no disrespect for Portugal.
Absolutely.
They're wonderful countries. I had my honeymoon in Portugal. I've spent lots of time in Germany. But those two countries got the Security Council seat over Canada. I found that surprising. And I think Canada should have got it. And if we had had a Liberal government, or if it was still, the Liberal government before Stephen Harper, I believe we would have got it. But the point is, since Stephen Harper has become Prime Minister, the international community has looked upon Canada with less favor. And that's because of it's not just because we have a Conservative government, it's because of what they've done or not done. And examples would be, for example, Africa. They've cut all aid to Africa. How can you do that? Canada now doesn't provide aid to Africa.
Oh my God.
Think about that. What can you even say about that? We have the environmental issue. People now don't respect Canada. We are now one of the worst countries in the world, of the developed countries, on the environment. When we have our conferences, Copenhagen, whatever it may be, we now get the awards for the worst country in the world on the environment. We got it most recently. It's an embarrassment to me.
Absolutely,
that
it is.
With such a serious international issue and national issue for Canada, that we would be lagging so far behind. Look at what the Conservatives just did. They just appointed Peter Kent as Environment Minister a couple days ago. And they, from what I've read and from what I've thought about it and from what I've spoken to persons about, they appointed Peter Kent, who has no experience in the environment at all, for political reasons. They hope that will help them in the Toronto area in the next election. But they appointed somebody who has no experience with respect to the environment, and this is now, think about this, how seriously they consider the environment. This is now their 5th environment minister since they've been in power.
Oh my God.
What can you do with 5 different ministers in such a short period of time, 4 years?
And appointed only on political merits, not on the merits by itself.
Exactly. You know, I will say that Jim Prentice, I respected him, the last environment minister. I interacted with him, not a lot, but enough to know that he was somebody that I respected. And I actually thought that, I felt sorry for him because he was obviously being stopped by Stephen Harper and the conservative right-wing persons in that party from doing anything on the environment. So I'm not surprised that he quit and he left and he went to Bay Street. And now they put somebody in the environmental portfolio who is clearly there only for political reasons, has no experience, and once again it's their 5th environment minister. So you're talking about Canada being respected on the international stage. That's, we keep going down. And the sign of the way the international community thinks of us now is the Security Council not getting the UN Security Council seat. So I have a problem with that. You know what? One of the things that the international community does speak about, how much they respect Canada about, is our banking system. And everybody points to Canada as having a wonderful banking system that went through the recession, and we didn't lose any banks unlike other countries. And you know what? They're right. Canada does have a great banking system. But don't thank Stephen Harper. Thank Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin. Because when Stephen Harper was opposition leader and we were in power, Stephen Harper argued for the exact same deregulation of the banking sector that happened in the United States that caused them to lose their banks. Oh, yes. So if there had been a conservative government earlier than there had been, and they had made those changes, we would have gone through the same problem in Canada in the banking sector. So all I can say is we were very lucky that they were not in power at that time, and now the Harper Conservatives are seeking to take credit for our banking sector, which they would have ruined if they had been in power earlier based on what they said.
Getting back to the banking system, which you mentioned a little while ago, I do see that USA did go into a financial crunch. Unfortunately, we didn't go that deep down. But yes, things are tight. I do see new immigrants, as we are a country of immigrants, people qualifying for mortgages very less because things are tight. Financial situation is tight. And rightly said so. The credit shouldn't be going to the current government, it should be going to the people who really founded it. And you rightly said so. Coming back again to that question that you are son of immigrant parents and refugee parents, if I'm correct. So we form a society of immigrants and mostly first-generation Canadians in your riding. Do correct me if I'm wrong here.
You're correct.
Okay. So how do you react, because there's a language barrier, of course there's a cultural barrier, of course there are other issues, immigrants don't naturally speak English all the time that well because it takes them time to adjust and recoup with the situations. How does your office communicate with them? Do you have a multilingual staff or how does that work?
First thing I want to say is, in terms of my familiarity with immigrant communities, I mentioned the Polish community because that's where I'm from.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But for many years as a lawyer through my law firm, before I ran for anything for myself, I worked with immigrant communities. So, I mean, I don't want to name all of them because I'll miss some, but you know, the South Asian community, and the Sikh community, and the Hindu community, the Tamil community, the Muslim community, there's so many different communities that I've met with and worked with over the years, oftentimes for free, just to help them. So in terms of speaking the language, I've worked with so many people in so many different communities that for some of it I understand. I mean, not much, but I can pick up some flow sometimes in some of the languages. But I have so many close friends in all of these various communities that if the language is ever a barrier, they're by my side anyways, and they're interpreting or helping me interact with the people who need help. In my office, when I need to interact with people, I have Robin, who you may know, who speaks many different languages. He's Sikh. I have Amjad, who speaks many different languages. He's Muslim. Paula, who is Italian and speaks Italian fluently. I have Steve, who speaks Greek fluently. I speak Polish. And we have many other friends and volunteers who come in. So even in terms of the staff persons that we have,
you do have a multilingual staff.
And many different volunteers who come in on, yes, I do. I have a multilingual staff, multi-ethnic staff, but more than that, I have many, many volunteers who come in who work and help. So there's not been one time that I've been a member of parliament that we've not been able to help somebody because of a language barrier. And if somebody comes in to my office and needs to speak their own language, I can find somebody, if I don't already have somebody who's there, I can find somebody to come in and assist, and I do. I've never once turned away anybody in my office. And I'll say this as well, I've never once turned away anybody in my office, period. Not just because of language or because we couldn't help them with language, but even for people who come in to my office who don't live in my riding, I still help them. Some other MPs, from what I've heard, and I'm not talking about Liberal MPs,
of course,
send people away and make them go to their own member of parliament if they don't live in the riding. I never do that. I have cases throughout Canada. I have cases from Vancouver, from Ottawa, from Montreal. I have cases throughout Canada, and I never say no to somebody if they need help.
We'll be continuing this conversation as we'll have to go for a short break.
जब लड़की अपनी स्किन की वजह से परेशान हो
तो फिक्र की क्या बात है, लेजर स्पॉट है ना।
लेजर स्पॉट फोटोफेशियल थर्माज एंटी-एजिंग लेजर हेयर रिमूवल लेजर स्पॉट where beauty meets elegant professionals.
लेजर स्पॉट हाईवे 10 और क्वींस के संगम पर कॉल शेला 9054872680.
ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਐਕਸੀਡੈਂਟ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਪਾਸ ਕਈ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਸਵਾਲ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਨ।
ਕਦੇ ਵੀ ਆਪਣਾ ਕਲੇਮ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਸੈਟਲ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਨਾ ਕਰੋ।
ਆਪਣੇ ਹੱਕਾਂ ਲਈ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਤਜਰਬੇਕਾਰ ਪਰਸਨਲ ਇੰਜਰੀ ਲਾਇਰ ਰਮੇਸ਼ ਸੰਗਾ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲੋ।
ਤੁਰੰਤ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ ਸੇਵਾਵਾਂ ਲਈ ਆਓ ਤੇ ਵਧੀਆ ਤੋਂ ਵਧੀਆ ਮੁਆਵਜ਼ਾ ਲਓ।
हम रियल स्टेट, फैमिली लॉ और इमिग्रेशन में भी सर्विसेज देते हैं।
905 677 9911।
ਫਰਨੀਚਰ ਖਰੀਦਣ ਦੇ ਦੋ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਨ। ਪਹਿਲਾ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਰੀ ਦਿਹਾੜੀ ਗੇੜੇ ਕੱਢੋ ਤੇ ਘਰ ਨੂੰ ਵਾਪਸ ਆ ਜਾਓ, ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਇੱਕ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਜਾਓ ਤੇ ਸਾਰਾ ਪਸੰਦ ਦਾ ਫਰਨੀਚਰ ਘਰ ਲੈ ਆਓ। ਨੋਬਲ ਫਰਨੀਚਰ ਤੇ ਲੱਗੀ ਆ ਭਾਰੀ ਸੇਲ, ਘੱਟ ਕੀਮਤਾਂ ਤੇ 100% ਫਰਨੀਚਰ। ਆਪਣੇ ਘਰ ਦਾ ਸ਼ਿੰਗਾਰ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਨੋਬਲ ਫਰਨੀਚਰ ਦੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਬ੍ਰਾਂਚ ਤੇ ਪਹੁੰਚੋ। 905 790 6790 905 790 6790 नोबल फर्नीचर।
अपने कारोबार की तरक्की के लिए प्रिंट पब्लिसिटी और बेहतरीन प्रिंटिंग के लिए सिर्फ एक ही नाम, जहां जदीद टेक्नोलॉजी से स्टोर फ्रंट साइंस, चैनल लेटर्स, बैनर्स, रियल एस्टेट साइंस, सैंडविच बोर्ड्स, व्हीकल ग्राफिक्स, बिजनेस कार्ड्स, पोस्ट कार्ड्स, लेबल्स, फ्लायर्स आपके बजट और आपके वक्त में बनाए जाते हैं। आपका काम सिर्फ सोचना है, क्योंकि
We print your thoughts.
साइंस टू गो।
Your constituency or your riding does consist immigrants. From the grassroots levels, I say, when an immigrant migrates or his or her family tends to migrate to Canada, there's a common complaint that no political party is ready to have a relationship or interaction with them unless they are citizens, because they are of no use to them, they are not voters. How do you tend to react to that situation in your riding in particular and Canada in general? Does the Liberal Party or you in general or particular do have any answers or indications towards that? And that is a common complaint.
So let me answer that in two parts. The first part being what I do in my office, and the second part being more of a Liberal Party answer. In terms of myself in my office, as I said to you, I don't turn away anybody. I've never turned away anybody. And I have met and helped so many people that are not Canadian citizens that can't vote for me. So whether they're landed or whatever it may be.
Refugees, whatever the case
whatever
may
it may be, I help them with the refugee claims, whatever it may be. And I know they can't vote for me, but that's not the point. I'm not a member of Parliament simply to be elected and re-elected, although I want to be. I'm here to try to do good. So it has nothing to do with whether somebody can vote for me. It's whether somebody's sitting in front of me, they need help, and I can help them, and I do. So for myself, it doesn't matter if if somebody's in Canada legally, I'll help them. Now, in terms of the Liberal Party of Canada, the Liberal Party of Canada is the party of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. What you have to remember about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is we specifically enshrined in Canadian law multiculturalism. That's in our Constitution under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We did that. The Liberal Party did that.
True regime.
That's right. We, the Liberal Party, we are the party of immigrants. I mean, I'm, once again, a first-generation Canadian. I'm an immigrant. I know that I'm not a visible minority, but I'm an immigrant. And the Liberal Party is the party that remembers that and stands for Canadians. And I'll give you a concrete example of proof. When new Canadians come to Canada, they need help. English training, resettlement services, whatever it may be. You talked about mortgages, and we can talk about that some more if you want. But they need help. They have to get used to Canada. We have settlement agencies in Canada. Agencies that are charged, that their business is to help new Canadians get acclimatized to Canada, including learning language. Well, the Liberal Party of Canada, when we were last in power under Paul Martin, negotiated an agreement with provinces that over the last 5 years, more than $200 million would have been spent on these settlement agencies to help new Canadians. That's what we believe in as a Liberal Party. Well, the Conservative government cut all of that.
Is that so?
Over the last 5 years, the Canadians have lost over $200 million for settlement services that were cut by Stephen Harper and the Conservatives. Now, it's even worse than that. So if we had had a Liberal government, there would have been more than $200 million spent in the last 5 years because we wouldn't have cut it. We're the ones who promised it.
Who introduced it.
Introduced it. It was law. So the Conservatives cut that. But even worse than that, to show you how much people talk about Jason Kenney, and they talk about him going to events, and they talk about how the Conservatives are, targeting ridings like my riding through the immigrant populations, and they talk about how the immigrant, new Canadians are, thinking more about the Conservatives. Some people talk about that. But I don't actually think any of that's true. It's especially not true for people that know what's happening. Because you have the $200 million of cuts that I've just spoken about. New Canadians who also know that since Conservatives have been in power, it has been much harder to get visitors' visas from countries for people to come over. And I'll give you an example. Last summer, the summer before, there was a conference in Brampton to promote Punjabi culture.
Okay.
Not Sikh culture, Punjabi culture. And you had 75 thinkers, teachers, educators from India and Pakistan, because this is Punjabi, it's not just Sikh, right, for both countries, culture. It's over 75 people apply to come to Canada for this conference.
Okay.
Thinkers. Over 50, I think the number was 55, 57, I don't remember exactly, but it was something in that range, were turned down. Were not allowed to come to Canada for this intellectual conference to discuss the preservation of the Punjabi culture. And I will say to you, if you want culture preserved, you need people coming from abroad to interact with the new Canadians.
And the reason being for the rejection?
Well, that's the funny thing. Jason Kenney came to the same conference, and they talk about him going everywhere and speaking.
Yes.
So he was there and he spoke, and I was there. After he spoke, he immediately left, and I spoke, and I challenged him, and I said, how can you say you're being a good Minister of Immigration? How can you say you respect immigrant communities? How can you say you're in favor of promoting Punjabi culture when you refuse approximately 57 of 75 academics and thinkers and learners, educators from around the world to come to Canada for a conference like this? And I sent him a letter, and I challenged him to have a full review of this decision and a full review of this immigration system. And you know what he said? Nothing. I followed up with him. You know what he said? Nothing. For over 2 years, approximately 2 years, he's ignored my plea and request to review this terrible decision, which has no respect to new Canadians, and he's done nothing. So yes, the Conservatives can talk about liking and supporting new Canadians, but it's their actions that count. And I'll give you another example. Over Christmas time, you know how I just talked about how they cut over $200 million from the settlement services?
Yes.
They did it again.
Oh.
Over Christmas when nobody's paying attention. So while people are eating turkey or they're away on vacation or they're with their family, they cut more. They cut it was around $55 million for the settlement agencies just for this coming year. They cut more. And of that, approximately $44 million was just in Ontario. So for the people in Brampton, in the GTA, in Mississauga, and these areas that really need this money and really need this help, while the media wasn't perhaps paying attention because it's the Christmas holidays, and I'm not blaming them because everybody has to have a rest, but while everybody was going through the Christmas holidays quietly, hoping nobody would notice, the Conservatives cut another $55 million from the settlement agencies just for this year and $44 million just from the GTA. So when people in Brampton now call up and they want help and they're new to Canada,
okay,
and they can't get a spot, or they call up the agencies that are in the phone book and their doors are closed because of the Conservatives' further cuts, remember this. Don't be upset and then do nothing. Remember this. And remember, new Canadians, remember in the next election campaign who your friends really are. We would have helped you a tremendous amount. And the Conservatives do nothing but cuts to new Canadians. And what do they do instead? Because there is money. There's money. They spent $1.2 billion on the couple-day G8, G20 summit in Toronto.
Photo op, I would call it.
A photo op. And I'm on the Public Safety National Security Committee. And I questioned the Minister of Public Safety. And he admitted that they made a political decision to split the conferences, the G8 and G20, between Huntsville and Toronto. And they kept the G8-20 in Huntsville because that's where Conservative Minister Tony Clement's riding is.
Absolutely.
And that's why they split it, because his riding is in Huntsville and Toronto is Liberal. And they admitted that because they split the conference between the two locations, they spent over $200 million more. They wasted over $200 million of our money, taxpayer money, because of the splitting of these meetings. So you think about this. That $200 million, that's the money they cut from the settlement agencies for the last 5 years. That just by having the meeting in one place rather than two places, they could have paid for all of that. It cost $1.2 billion to have this meeting, the G8-G20. It cost London, England, one of the largest capitals in the world, when they had their meeting there, $30 million for the same security. So London, England cost $30 million, but the Conservatives spend $1.2 billion. You tell me how that isn't a waste of our money. Think about all the good we could have done with that money. And there is money. $6 billion in corporate tax cuts to wealthy corporations is what the Conservatives are putting in effect this year. Think about that again, $6 billion in corporate tax cuts. We already have one of the lowest corporate tax rates in the world. But they want to give them further. And it's not corporate tax cuts. It's actually, when you think about it, because they've ran a $56 billion deficit for 2 years in a row now, not just 1 year, 2 years in a row, $56 billion. And because of that, it's not a corporate tax cut. They're borrowing $6 billion to give corporate tax cuts to wealthy corporations when they already have one of the lowest corporate tax rates in the world. They're doing that. We have the fighter jets. They're spending billions of dollars. Now, we need to protect our country. I'm not saying we shouldn't have a strong military. I'm a strong supporter of the military. I want to say this. I'm a strong supporter of the military. I support good military funding, period. But let's make it smart. 2 aspects to this deal. In terms of the stealth fighters. One, do we need long-range bombers? Or do we need more interceptors? Or search and rescue? What do we need as Canadians? So that was the first issue. They're buying stealth bombers. I don't know how that helps protect Canada, because unless we're going on the offensive and bombing country in Europe, that's not the kind of plane that we need. So that's the first thing. The second thing is they have, as you may have heard, a sole source contract. So think about this. It's like me going to you and saying, how much will you charge me to build these planes? You give me a price and I say thank you. Everybody knows that's not the way to do it. I can go to you and I can say, what's your price? But then I'm also going to go to you. And I'm going to say, what's your price and what's your price? And then I'm going to, on behalf of Canadians, I'm going to negotiate and I'm going to get the best plane at the best price for the Canadian public. Well, the Conservatives weren't concerned about the type of plane. They picked long-range stealth bombers, which doesn't affect the protection of Canada directly, and it doesn't help with search and rescue on such a large border that we have. And they sole sourced the contract. They didn't even get the best price. I believe it's the Australians are paying millions of dollars less per plane for the same plane than Canada.
Same hardware, same infrastructure. So
my point of saying all that, I mean, it's very detailed, and I'm talking about other issues. But the point of that, to go back to the new Canadians, is the Conservatives cannot say that they don't have money, because they have no problem borrowing $6 billion for corporate tax cuts. They have no problem spending billions on planes. They have no problem spending 1.2 on the summit, including an extra $200 million wasting because they divided it between Tony Clements riding up north in Huntsville and in Toronto. So there is money that they're spending. They're just choosing, and remember this, they're choosing not to spend it on new Canadians. Not only are they choosing not to spend it, they're choosing to cut it, and they're choosing to cut it when they hope nobody's watching and listening.
Absolutely. This clearly gives that how conveniently the government hoodwinks the general public, and just in the cover of Christmas, everything gets washed out.
That's right.
That's the way I would look at it.
So when I heard about this, I had my office start calling some of these agencies. And I'm not going to give names, but there are a number of agencies that at the end of March, their doors will be closed. People will be unemployed. New Canadians will not get the services they need.
Which they badly need, I would say, because that's the only guiding source.
That's right. So it's not fair, because we need immigrate. We have an aging population. The greatest growth rate we have in Canada is for persons, I believe, who are seniors. I was going to say 80 and above. I think that's the statistic, but it's seniors in general. And for our growth and for the development of our economy, for our good, we need new Canadians to come here with their skills. So when they come, I think it's a little bit of, it should be a little bit of a deal. They're going to come to Canada and bring their talents. We're going to take care of them. How are we going to do that? We're going to help to resettle them, right, through these settlement agencies, and make sure they know the language and get acclimatized to Canada and see how things work. And we're going to help them use their skills. So when they apply, for example, to come to Canada as an engineer, using only one example, and we give them points for that, and we say, come to Canada, you're going to be an engineer. And then they come, and they realize they cannot be an engineer.
Yes,
That's a
that is an
problem.
interesting point. I would like to continue this discussion, but we'll have to take a short break. But we'll continue this discussion as it is. I would like to continue this discussion, but we'll have to take a short break. But we'll continue this discussion.
जब लड़की अपनी स्किन की वजह से परेशान हो
तो फिक्र की क्या बात है, लेजर स्पॉट है ना।
लेजर स्पॉट, फोटो फेशियल, थर्माज एंटी एजिंग, लेजर हेयर रिमूवल, लेजर स्पॉट, where beauty meets elegant professionals.
लेजर स्पॉट हाईवे 10 और क्वींस के संगम पर कॉल शेला 9054872680।
ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਐਕਸੀਡੈਂਟ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਪਾਸ ਕਈ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਸਵਾਲ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਨ।
ਕਦੇ ਵੀ ਆਪਣਾ ਕਲੇਮ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਸੈਟਲ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਨਾ ਕਰੋ।
ਆਪਣੇ ਹੱਕਾਂ ਲਈ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਤਜਰਬੇਕਾਰ ਪਰਸਨਲ ਇੰਜਰੀ ਲਾਇਰ ਰਮੇਸ਼ ਸੰਘਾ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲੋ।
ਤੁਰੰਤ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ ਸੇਵਾਵਾਂ ਲਈ ਆਓ ਤੇ ਵਧੀਆ ਤੋਂ ਵਧੀਆ ਮੁਆਵਜ਼ਾ ਲਓ।
हम रियल स्टेट, फैमिली लॉ और इमिग्रेशन में भी सर्विसेज देते हैं।
905-677-9911।
ਫਰਨੀਚਰ ਖਰੀਦਣ ਦੇ ਦੋ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਹਨ। ਪਹਿਲਾ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਦਿਹਾੜੀ ਗੇੜੇ ਕੱਢੋ ਤੇ ਘਰ ਨੂੰ ਵਾਪਸ ਆ ਜਾਓ, ਜਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਇੱਕ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਜਾਓ ਤੇ ਸਾਰਾ ਪਸੰਦ ਦਾ ਫਰਨੀਚਰ ਘਰ ਲੈ ਆਓ। ਨੋਬਲ ਫਰਨੀਚਰ ਤੇ ਲੱਗੀ ਆ ਭਾਰੀ ਸੇਲ, ਘੱਟ ਕੀਮਤਾਂ ਤੇ 100% ਫਰਨੀਚਰ। ਆਪਣੇ ਘਰ ਦਾ ਸ਼ਿੰਗਾਰ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਨੋਬਲ ਫਰਨੀਚਰ ਦੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਬ੍ਰਾਂਚ ਤੇ ਪਹੁੰਚੋ। 905-790-6790 905-790-6790 नोबल फर्नीचर।
अपने कारोबार की तरक्की के लिए प्रिंट पब्लिसिटी और बेहतरीन प्रिंटिंग के लिए सिर्फ एक ही नाम, जहां जदीद टेक्नोलॉजी से स्टोर फ्रंट साइंस, चैनल लेटर्स, बैनर्स, रियल स्टेट साइंस, सैंडविच बोर्ड्स, व्हीकल ग्राफिक्स, बिजनेस कार्ड्स, पोस्ट कार्ड्स, लेबल्स, फ्लायर्स आपके बजट और आपके वक्त पे बनाए जाते हैं। आपका काम सिर्फ सोचना है, क्योंकि
We print your thoughts.
साइंस टू गो।
Welcome back again, sir.
Thank you very much.
So we were in this conversation. I am literally shocked because this story of the funding being cut off and all these centers or help centers for immigrants being just locked out because there's no funding available was not reported in the press, you say? Because of the Christmas holidays. And I understand Christmas is a much more important event and only comes once a year and more strings are attached to it rather than funding being cut. How convenient for the government to do it.
I saw, I'm not saying that I saw every newspaper, but I think I saw one small article on it in the Toronto Star. Other than that, I didn't see anything. I'm not saying there wasn't anything, but I didn't see anything.
But who would pay attention being in the Christmas rush?
Well, that's exactly the point. The Conservatives did this. And you know what? This is even, I want you to think about how they did this. It shows you something about the character of Stephen Harper and the Conservatives. They didn't even make an announcement. This wasn't public that they did this. They don't want people to know they did this.
Isn't it public funding?
Yes, but this is how they did the cuts. They called the agencies directly and told them at the end of March, there's no more funding. Phone calls, some people got letters, but they communicated to the agencies, hoping, I believe, that nobody would really find out that they were doing this. Because if this one agency finds out that they're being cut, that doesn't mean that they're going to know that the agency down the street is also being cut. Okay. They might think it's just them that's
so basically
us.
What you're trying to say, or what I am understanding, that it is a different deal. It's sort of a thing with everybody. Okay, I'm going to cut you off, but I'm not going to cut you off, and they have no interaction amongst themselves.
all of these people would not, unless we did something. The Liberal Party did something about this. We held a press conference. We issued a release. We've sent a letter to Stephen Harper telling him that what he's done is deplorable and asking him to bring the money back to help these new Canadians. He's ignored us. But they'll tell you that they're a friend of the immigrant community. They want your vote. They want your money. But they're not going to help you. Well,
No.
Jason Kenney's ignoring me. Whenever I send him a letter complaining about something on behalf of new Canadians and all Canadians, sometimes he sends letters back saying, sorry, I can't help you. A couple times, I think very, very few times, he's actually done something and given a minister's permit in a case that clearly should have been granted in the first place. And I want to talk about that system in a moment. And most of the time, he ignores me. I'm going to give you my email address and my phone number.
We'll have it on the screen as well.
Okay, that's fine. So the phone number is 416-388-7353, and the email is kaniaa9@parl.gc.ca. So that's how to reach me personally. And I don't hide my cell number, I don't hide my email, because I want people to know that they can contact me and I'll help them to the best of my ability anytime. But in terms of what to do about this, I don't actually think you can do anything about this right now, because I don't believe
You can always voice your opinion, that's for sure.
That's right, you can voice your opinion, but I don't actually think you can do anything now, because this is not in the heart of Stephen Harper and his Conservative ministers. What's in their heart is what they do. Judge their actions, not their words. When they make all these cuts, when they treat people in a disrespectful manner, when they won't bring people over for visits, the conference I spoke about, judge them by their actions, not by the things that they say. So in the next election campaign, the way to do something, the reason I say you cannot probably do anything now, is they don't listen to me. They don't listen to the opposition parties. They're not going to listen to you. They're going to do what they want to do to appease their right-wing base. The way to stop them is in the next election campaign, get involved. Vote.
There we go.
The first thing you can do is just vote. Come out and vote. Don't think that one vote doesn't matter. It does matter. Come out and volunteer and get involved. It doesn't have to cost you any money to come out and spend some time on a weekend or an evening and help. Knock on doors. Call your friends and family. Have them come out and vote. That's how you help. And if the next election comes and we still have a Stephen Harper government and you don't get help and you have cuts and your life continues to get worse, don't blame me. Think about what you could have done to change that result if you had only come and voted or brought your friends or you came and you volunteered. And in the next campaign, I believe it's going to be a fight between the Conservatives and the Liberals to form a government. So I will say to those persons who sometimes vote NDP or Green, if you do, you're really voting for Stephen Harper, because your vote gets taken away from the progressive Liberal Party and goes to the other parties that probably won't win. And the result is Stephen Harper gets more seats. So if you want to defeat Harper and if you want to stop him from what he's trying to do, which is to get a majority government so that he can then do anything he wants, vote Liberal and come and help us.
Thank you very much for your time. We'll definitely have your website, your email, your contact information on the screen as well. Thanks once again very much. We'd like to touch more bases and we'll have you once again on our program pretty soon. I enjoyed the conversation and thanks for informing.